This was very difficult and helpful at the same time, and it was very difficult to start to relinquish some of the control over some of the detail of what went into one of my own games, since I was so closely personally tied to the game. But as it turns out, it was also something that was very necessary. When I first decided to build Ultima 4 into this very different kind of product, a product where there was no big antagonist, and where the principal focus of the game was to prove yourself to be a person of virtue, I was really very concerned over what the public and what the media reception to this game would be. I was concerned that people might think I was either getting on a soapbox, or concerned that people might have thought I'd gone way off the deep end and things of this nature. But so even though I was very concerned, I was very pleasantly surprised when it did come out that first of all, the press was more than kind to the project, and the public reception was very strong. And it made Ultima 4 my very first #1 best-selling product. In fact, Ultima 4 did so well that if you remember, Billboard magazine for only about a year used to cover the software industry. And for more than 6 months of their 1 year of covering the software industry, Ultima 4 held the top position in their top listings. Although the reception to Ultima 4 was, of course, very positive, it's kind of humorous to note what the few, if only, negative reception seems to have been. And that was, in many, if not all, of the previous Ultimas, many people took great joy, and after they finished the game, or when they started getting tired of playing it, they would start doing things like going around and slaughtering everyone in sight, or raping and pillaging and plundering, so to speak, all the towns and castles. And Ultima 4 was the first game where, if you did take that path, it not only became impossible to win, but there were very negative circumstances that surrounded that, which of course was the whole point of the game. But there were a number of people out there in the world who really enjoyed playing their evil thief character, and were a little frustrated that they couldn't do it this time around. But I considered that a minor drawback, and was overall very pleased with the direction it had taken. Well, that leads us up into Ultima 5. If I had to critique Ultima 4 personally from a standpoint, of course, again, I'd mentioned that the programming was now an aspect which I felt I had pretty good control over, which is why Ultima 4 was really, the main focus of it was storytelling. Well, Ultima 4 was my very first attempt at storytelling in a big way, so to speak. So Ultima 5, being my second time around to do large stories, I really feel was a much better told story. In Ultima 4, the story of virtue, where you had to prove yourself to be a virtuous individual, all of the tests and all of the circumstances were fairly black and white. I mean, if it was something evil, you got rid of it. If it was something good, you took care of it. And the choices were fairly straightforward and simple. And in the story itself, as it progressed, was fairly repetitive in my mind. There were many times where for a certain kind of a quest, you had to do a similar quest for each of the different virtues. With Ultima 5, one of the first things I did was get more help. I actually started into Ultima 5 with another programmer, John Miles, working with me on it from the very, very beginning. Again, help was something that was still new to me, and so that was somewhat of a painful process as well, as that now I had two very different design philosophies and personalities struggling from the very beginning working together. But as it progressed, the logic and the clear advantage to it eventually became clear. From a play standpoint, one of the main advantages of Ultima 5 became very clear right from the outset. The storyline that we picked, first of all, was one where no longer was there really a black and white issue of good and evil. The basic scenario was that there was an antagonist who was, while favoring the 8 virtues which you proved to be good in the first installment of this trilogy, Ultima 4, he had really taken these too far, and had become much more like the Spanish Inquisition, very oppressive and very strict. And you became more of a Robin Hood-style outlaw, working behind the scenes against the government. But the people that you would meet with as you traveled throughout the world had very differing opinions on the whole situation. In any totalitarian or dictatorial system of government, there are many people who suffer as well as there are many people who benefit. And so, as you would go around through the world, You would come up some people who would definitely be against him and be in your favor. There would be some people who were very clearly on the opposite side, whose, for instance, businesses had thrived and crime was down, and were very much in favor of the new regime. And you'd meet many people who were kind of in the gray area in between, some of whom you might be able to convince to join your side of the struggle. Others who you might think you had convinced to join your side of the struggle, but then later on would turn you into the bad guys, so to speak. And so the story unfolding and the way it unfolded and the kinds of quests and scenarios, I really feel had much more significance and depth and breadth to them. Another one in particular, for instance, is that in most games, in most fantasy role-playing games, the antagonist is somebody who you are told in the instruction booklet is the big evil wizard you're supposed to defeat, and so you travel around through the countryside collecting magic and money and treasure, usually taking advantage of the peasants along the way, never really seeing the bad guy take any advantage of the peasants. But then finally in the end you meet the bad guy who's really never done anything to you, and you go and you vanquish him or her. What we did this time around is, since we did have an antagonist, we wanted you to have some very personal, real-world reason for disliking him. So first of all, his effects and his efforts were felt throughout the kingdom, and you saw them in many ways and forms, in this case the Shadow Lords, who were traveling about and doing evil and harm. And whenever you met up with him personally, he in fact tries to sway you and convince you as to why what he's doing is really for the betterment of the people, but then in the end ends up wiping out, quite literally killing one of the members of your party quite permanently. In most games you can actually get things resurrected, so death wasn't really permanent. But in this case, death was permanent for your number one sidekick, the guy that had been with you from the beginning of time, since the first Ultima, was removed forevermore. And so the depth and feel and the player personal involvement and the emotional response that went into the game vastly exceeded its predecessors. The technological changes that went into Ultima are also very significant. If you look at the previous Ultimas, as each Ultima has grown and developed, I believe very much, and I think few people will argue, with the quality and the quantity of play value that a player has received with each Ultima has gone up and up and up. However, there's also been one negative side to the Ultima development to date, which is, as the Ultimas have become bigger and more sophisticated, they become more and more difficult for a beginning user to be able to sit down and use early on in his playtime. And so the ramp-up time of learning it has become more significant, which has also made it more intimidating for a non-Ultima player to begin playing with. So that was one of the main objectives with this Ultima, was since we now had a technology base which was more powerful than before, and having learned a few lessons from some of my competitors in the marketplace, as well as learned a few lessons from some of our in-house products, and Chris Roberts in the Times of Lore project, as well as Todd Porter in Knights of Legend, and Greg Malone and Mobius. All three have taught me many lessons as to what the strong points of their games were, and admittedly I've borrowed ideas and concepts from them as well as others to take Ultima VI now and rebuild the technology from the ground up, to build a technology which was extremely accessible to the beginning role-playing gamer as well as to the serious long-time adventurer. One of the most obvious ways that's noticed is in the interface. Ultimas have always had a single keystroke command entry method, which I believe and still do is a fast, efficient way to impart your desired activity to the computer. This time around, we scrapped all those 26 keyboard commands and replaced them with only 10 keyboard commands or icons. For instance, as the Ultimas evolved, you used to be able to do things like ignite a torch and peer at a gem and jimmy a lock with a key. And then eventually I ran out of keys, so I had to use a few others, like use the sextant and use a crystal ball. But then it became very obvious that those other three, igniting a torch, is really like using a torch, and using a magic gem, and using a key. And so I could reduce the command structure very dramatically down to only about 10 commands, and with no loss of functionality whatsoever, but just a simplification such that it's much easier to learn, it's easier to use, it's quicker to understand, and I really believe has made this Ultima really, even though it's the largest and most sophisticated to date, I actually believe it is the easiest of all of them to play. In the creation of the world, previous Ultimas have had towns and castles and dungeons and combat screens, each one of which has had, from a coding standpoint, we've had to write the ability to get to, all 26 commands had to function in each of these 5 different environments, which means each kind of piece of code had to be rewritten 5 times, making it very prone to bugs and very difficult to write and just quantity to write. From a player's standpoint, they had to learn how to interact with things in each of these 5 different environments, making it more complex for the player. And that's another one of the main changes are, as we said, we threw away all 5 different kinds of environments and we reduced the world to one monoscale single environment, where all actions, combats, and interactions take place all within that one physical kind of environment. No longer do you go in and out of towns. You just walk out of the gateways of one town, keep walking down the road until you walk into the buildings or gateways of another town. Conversations, the people themselves within the world. In previous Ultimas, Ultima 4 was really the start of our interactive conversation where you could begin to ask people questions about themselves. Ultima 5 expanded upon it significantly, but in Ultima 6 we actually took where there used to be a limitation of about 1K of memory dedicated to an individual's personality, which was their conversation. We made there now to where there's literally no limit on the size that a single individual's personality or conversation can be. Additionally, the people in your own party. In previous Ultimas, the other members of your own party were really just extensions of yourself, where you fully controlled each and every one of their actions, so that even though there were some characters like Yolo and Shamano and Dupre who have been with you since the very first Ultima, as soon as they have joined your party, really their personal personalities have really disappeared. They've really become part of yourself. In this Ultima, they take on much more of their own personalities. So, for instance, not only in combat can they fight for themselves, which is one major aspect of it, but more importantly, in conversations as you walk around the world and talk to other people, they can chime in whenever they choose and make full commentary. So, for instance, Dupre is your gung-ho fighter, and you could be in a shop, for instance, buying a sword, and you can chime in and say, "Gee, that sword's not worth 1/10 of what that guy's asking. I know a place where we can get one for 1/3 that price." And Yolo, on the other hand, who's the bard, Yolo is like your best friend. And so throughout the game, Yolo will chime in and give you advice and consultation. And when push comes to shove, it's usually Yolo's advice that's correct. Shamano, on the other hand, Shamano is the one who's your ranger character. He's the one who knows the land. Shamano is one with Britannia. And the reason why that is the case, by the way, in case for those of you who didn't already know it, Shamano is another alter ego of myself. And so I'm a very fortunate individual. I get to be there as Richard Garriot often. I get to be there as Lord British. And also Shamano is a character represented by myself. And so Shamano, since he is the one that knows the most about the land, he's the one that can chime in and tell you where you are when you find certain dungeons or cave entrances. He's the one that has his ear to the ground and can hear when monsters are coming and detect things from afar. Ultima 6 also wraps up the second trilogy of the Ultima series. Ultima 6 is another storyline involving virtue and morals and ethics of you, the individual personal player. You may have also noticed, by the way, let me rewind even a little bit here through Ultima 4 that carries through to 5 and 6, which is character creation. In most role-playing games, including the earliest Ultimas, your character was created by rolling dice or assigning numbers to attributes, and this character that you would create is essentially your alter ego, where you might be a skinny little computer guy sitting over here behind your computer, but you can run a big evil barbarian if you want to as your alter ego. In Ultimas 4, 5, and 6 in particular, since the stories involved ethical and moral decisions made by you as an individual, it was more important to me that this character be really you, not your alter ego, but really you. Which is why you'll notice that the introduction screens to Ultima and the character creation, all is there to support how you, a real person from the real world, find your way traveling to and from Britannia. And the character creation itself, as you answer the questions, the ethical dilemmas that the character creation poses to you, the more you answer questions that show honesty and the search for truth, things of this nature, the more it raises your intelligence, and the more it drives you towards being a mage or an alchemist kind of a character, the guy's in search of truth. And the more you answer questions for valor and courage, the more that would drive up your strength and drive you towards being a fighter kind of a character. And the more you answer questions favoring things like compassion and love, the more that would drive you towards more of the artistic kinds of endeavors, and it would raise your dexterity. In that way, we build a character who is more accurately a direct echoing of what you truly are like as an individual. You may have a character who is bigger and stronger than you are, for instance, but is much more of a personality match to you as an individual, which has been very important to this second trilogy. So another thing that's really good to probably point out about this point in time is that truly I am very much enjoying this opportunity to express to you my feelings and how important the Ultima series is and has been to me as an individual. Hopefully you've gleaned from this that truly Ultima for me is much more than just a game. It's more than just a product. It's not just what I do to make money. Ultima is what I do for my own personal fulfillment, for my own enjoyment, and a very important part of this is also the feedback that I get from users such as yourself. And so, if you feel compelled at all by what I've said to you on this tape or what you've seen in my games, to express to me what you feel is important about what I'm doing, or what things you feel I'm doing wrong, what things you feel I'm doing right, I very much appreciate that kind of input and feedback from those individuals. And truly, for those of you that have written in before, it does mean a great deal for me, not just in the sense of hearing from them, but also to hear their critiques as well. So any of you that would ever feel compelled to write in, please feel free to do, and know that it will be read and it will be appreciated. And of course, as long as I have a personal tie with you here today, it might be fun, of course, to give you a little bit of clues and insights as to how to get going in Ultima VI, or how, in fact, to speed along your quests. If you'd like to hear such things, don't worry, I won't give anything away, but if you don't want to hear any clues at all, you might as well want to skip a little ways ahead here. But first of all, let me point out that one of the first things that throws off a lot of our playtesters is the very first moment you have in the game starts with a battle. And so those of you who are uninitiated to the world of Ultima may be a little bit taken aback by that first battle, because the swords will be flying and arrows, things of this nature, so you may want to watch your head. However, since your good companions, Yolo and Dupre and Shamano, are fighting there with you, in fact, all you have to do is press the spacebar to pass, and just pass your turn and just walk out of the way, and your companions will complete the battle for you, presumably successfully. But one of the other first things in any Ultima that it takes is of course, getting money. Money is one of the things that oftentimes, before you can outfit your group and make very strong progress on your quests, even as you figure out what your quests are, you need money to buy your adventuring supplies. And so there are many ways to do that in this game. Not only, of course, can you fight monsters to collect treasure from them as you can in most role-playing games and in earlier Ultimas, but this time around you can actually work within the simulated ecosystem that exists within the game. For instance, you can go and you can buy grain from a farmer. You can take the grain to the flour mill and have it ground into flour. You can take the flour to a baker and have him sell the flour to the baker, and then buy some bread, and along the way hopefully make yourself some money. And so quite literally, if you're a beginning character, that might be one of the ways you decide to do that. Similarly, for instance, you can take an empty bucket, you can go and milk a cow, you can take that bucket of milk over to a butter churn and make yourself some butter. Not necessarily a very tasty way to keep your group fed, but it at least will work, and in fact you can make some money usually in that route as well. Similarly, you can do things starting with the raw materials of sheep and wool and carry that all the way to thread and cloth and clothing. Those are good ways for a beginner to start collecting money without endangering their life particularly. Also, there are fishing poles that you might be able to find or acquire sometime along in your quests. You can go out and go fishing to also supplement your food supplies. Lastly, of course, gold itself. There are some dungeons which are mine shafts, and if you take a shovel or a pickaxe down into the mine shaft, you can oftentimes find the mother lode on your own. A couple of clues for a little further along in the game might be two things here. First of all, one of the quests that you'll need will require you to find the gypsies. The gypsies, of course, are traveling bands of individuals who travel from city to city, and there are multiple groups of gypsies. And some of the gypsies I would label as being good gypsies, and some of the label I would say is not so good gypsies. But the gypsies you need to find, by the way, I will give you a clue, are led by a person named Zoltan. And so if you can find the group of gypsies led by Zoltan, you have probably found your way. However, Zoltan's group does travel back and forth between 3 different cities, so they will be a little more difficult to find than just to wander into one city and grab them. Another one that is a very important key path that might be helpful is Captain John. Captain John is a character who you will understand fairly early on is key to the solution, but locating him will be a subject of some debate. Many people will tell you different locations where he may have gone, but I, of course, will tell you the truth. He has traveled into the dungeon Hithloth, and so if you can travel to the very base of the dungeon Hithloth just before it comes out on the other side of the world, that is where you should find Captain John. Well, I'm about out of time here. In fact, I've overshot the mark that I was told to shoot for by a significant margin already. I'd just like to close with a comment about the fact that when I began the Ultima series and was working literally out of my closet in my home in Houston, that it has really come a long way since then. It's been a long, hard struggle in many ways, but fortune has turned my way in many ways as well. But in total, it's still a great deal of fun for me. And I sincerely hope that you too enjoy the work and effort that we put in Ultima VI. I hope you will also stick with me past Ultima VI on into the future Ultimas. It'd be very difficult for me at this point in time to predict how long they're going to last, but as long as it remains fun for me, and as long as it remains fun for you, indicated hopefully by the fact that people are still buying them, which will allow me to stay in the business of continuing to make them, we'll hopefully work together on into the future and have many, many more years of fun with Ultimas to come.